Okay. It says that it is taking a video. I'm old. Let me see. How is this working? I need this one. Okay. So, this is The Devil's in the DNA, Chapter 1. I titled it The Lunatic Womb. So, I'll just read it for you. When you are trying to have a child, at least in my case, floods of family memories consume you until you feel like you might drown under the crush of it all. Because not only are you going to be responsible for keeping this little one alive, you are also going to be responsible for the genes that you give it, right? We all hope to give our best genes, but that never seems to work out the way that we'd like for it to. I happen to shudder at the thought of giving a precious little one even a dollop of my DNA. I'm kind of secretly hoping that we'll find out that my eggs are too busy at the casino chugging free drinks and smoking cigars that we'll have to get donor eggs. Last modified date, 8/2/2017. Hint, hint, we use donor eggs. Okay, back to the story. In my previous post, I mentioned the devil in my DNA. Now, I'm not talking about male pattern baldness, diabetes, or a penchant for snogging sheep. I'm talking crazy people and alcoholics, okay? Crazy people on my mom's side, drunks on my dad's side. Allow me to fill you in on all my parents' faults so that I might make my excuses so much more poignant when I make them, and I will make them many times. So let's start with my mom, shall we? My mom, she never stood a chance. Honestly, she didn't. Like, there wasn't a way in hell with the cards she was dealt that she was shat out of her lunatic mother's womb. Spoiler alert, she was not crazy. Shat out of her lunatic mother's womb. Where was I? There we go. There was no way in hell with the cards that she was dealt that she was shat out of her lunatic mother's womb that she was ever going to be a normal person. My mother lived in a renovated chicken coop until she was 3. Her mom, as far as I can tell, was bipolar of the most heinous type. My mother's father was a piece of crap. We're all so proud of you. Yeah, so proud of you. Where was I? Blah, blah, blah. My mother's father was a piece of crap and was never there. He was a salesman or some such rot. He spent the money that he made on hookers and strippers. There were 4 children. My mother was the youngest. There were 2 sisters and 1 brother. The brother was a hermaphrodite. I'm not making this up. So what they didn't know back in those days was that children who are hermaphroditic are, I suppose you would say, female, which, anyway. So, people who are hermaphroditic, they are born sterile, but the hormones and whatnot, they present those secondary sex characteristics. So, I'm not sure, I'm going off script on this one because I've just, you learn, you live. I haven't done my research, so I do not know for sure. But I think the standard of care now is if the parents want what is presented as a penis is reconstructed into a clitoris. I think. Not sure. But anyway, it's a sad tale. I'll get back in here. So, anyway. I say back in the day, they let you choose which gender you would like your baby to be. Anyway, her family was so poor, basically what they did to this innocent child was leave what was on the inside and did some cosmetics to make testicles and left a penis that would never function. Last record of him that he was in a mental institution after being horribly abused by his adopted family, which... Hold on, let me put my finger here. Adopted family, where is it? found out that the adopted family was actually the aunt and uncle of his birth father. So, last record of him was in a mental institution after being horribly abused by his adopted family and going full out balls to the wall over the rainbow. Oldest sister is a Wiccan who wears really huge hats, 2 or 3 outfits at a time, and has braids down to her ass, which she crisscrosses across her pendulous bosom and ties behind her back. The other sister is a hypochondriac like my mom who wants to have her leg voluntarily amputated, has a dozen or so cats, and has narcolepsy. Yes, you heard me right, narcolepsy. At least that's what she calls it. I think she just wants an excuse to pour buckets of water on her husband while he sleeps. Anyway. So adoption. My mother's mother finally lost her mind. Spoiler. I mean, she kind of did, but she didn't. Anyway. You'll find out later. Anyway. Lost her mind, tried to kill her kids. We'll just, because this I can't write, because it isn't truth. Like what I wrote here, I found out now isn't true. But I will read you this is what the woman who raised me, this is what my mother told me. Okay, so I need you to understand what I'm about to read next were lies that my mother told me. My mother's mother finally lost her mind. She tried to kill her kids. She put them all in an area they used as a kitchen. It was an actual kitchen. Sealed it as best she could. Did not do that. Turned on the stove. Did do that. Blew out the pilot. Did do that. And then I wrote in here, just like Sylvia Plath. Isn't that nice? And then, again, more of the story that my mother told me. The farmer saw her outside the coop, screaming and wailing, pulling at her clothes and her hair. She went to the state asylum. The children went to an orphanage. More on the crazy maternal grandmother later. Okay. So that's just giving you a glimpse of what I thought was going on with her. But I say more on the crazy maternal grandmother later. I'm not finished with her level of crazy yet. So this is where the story should get better. It does get better, but it still remains craptastic in its own very sad way. So at 3, my mom, when she was 3, a couple that had 2 boys, biologically, apparently they wanted a girl. So at 3, a couple that had 2 boys adopted my mother and one of her narcoleptic sister. It's a successful family. They had plenty of food, nice warm home, a good Christian family that took yearly trips to state parks and sang hymns in the living room while Daddy Dearest played on the organ. My mother's new mother, however, came to find out she let her spirit just fucking die. Have you ever known somebody like that? Like just watching a zombie that doesn't rot? You know something's wrong, but you just can't place your finger on it. Before she was married to my mom's dad, she was this beautiful, vibrant, sensual woman who sought out adventures and did all kinds of things that back in her time were thought to be too risky or even too risque for a proper lady to do. Like, I have no earthly idea where she would marry a man like him. He killed her. Like, I truly believe that he did. She died a little bit each day. And I think that because she was always in a state of death, like always in a state of death and dying, like she developed full-blown hypochondriasis. Like I cannot remember a time when she was not dying. I don't remember a time that I did not hear that grandma was dying, or this may be our last insert occasion here that we didn't have with grandma. Actually, she never had anything. I'm serious. She never had cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart attacks, lung problems, nothing. And she was always frail, always sick. She had an entire drawer in her dresser that was devoted to prescriptions. I used to ransack that motherfucker for pain meds and tranks when I was a teenager. It was awesome. I was like Santa in my high school if I ever visited over Christmas break. Anyway. Grandma, over time, she just got smaller and smaller and weaker, and she just simply gave up. She was like dying for all of the years that I knew her. And if you knew her... Listen, if you knew her husband, you have to call him Charles. You would know why. But you have to say it like Magneto says it in the X-Men movies, dripping with contempt and a little bit of fear. Charles. What a piece of shit this man is. I say is here because he's still fucking alive at this point in time. He is not. The good Lord took him home. Anyway, I say what a piece of shit this man is because the bastard is still alive. He's almost 100 fucking years old and he's so goddamn stubborn. He will not die. There is a running joke in my family about it. I started it. Yes, I did. That side of the family has no humor. Anyway, the reason why he's still here is because neither God nor Satan wants him, like any part of him. He's too much of a douchebag for heaven, and Satan refuses to put up with his shit. So they're using their powers of heaven and hell to keep him here, like right here for fucking ever. This man tortured his family in so many ways. Nothing was ever good enough, ever. And the only person he ever loved in his life, if you would call it love, was his wife. And he killed her by sucking out her spirit like a 5-foot Nosferatu until there was nothing left but sagging skin and a jutting, brittle, cold bones. Like, he didn't like to share her with his children, so he doted on her, and it was only him. Like, him. Like, nothing left for the children, right? The only time they would ever get any kind of attention from her, because he would let her, right, is when they were sick. So my mother and her sister are both full-blown hypochondriacs. Go figure. Anyway, long after my grandmother died, my mother and her siblings, they fought over Charles's affections. Like, are you fucking kidding me with this guy? It has gotten pretty brutal at times. I have no idea why they bother. Like, I cut ties with that asshole years ago. Caveat, no matter what I say in this blog, no matter what horrible things I will say about my mother until the day I die. I love my mother, so don't fuck with her. But I digress. Boobala. What finally made me snap in regards to Charles was some sort of dinner at my grandparents' house. I don't remember the occasion. My mother went for a second helping of something, and Charles glared at her, pointed his fork at her eye, and said, if you weren't such a pig, maybe you could find a man to love you. The fuck? So my mother's eyes filled with tears, and my heart saturated with this black, voluminous rage. I shoved my chair back, and I let loose a barrage of filth and bile. My muscles were so tense in an effort to keep myself from eviscerating him that I could barely breathe, and I could feel my bones crunching under the strain. Like, ugh. Now, when I see him, and I do see him on occasion when my mother tells me to, it makes her happy. Kind of. He's this shrunken little thing. His eyes are clouded with cataracts, earlobes are down to his shoulders, face and head covered with age spots, more hair on his ears and his nose than the crown of his head. He's a sad little figure of a man. And as I sit here typing, I can easily muster the utter hatred I have had for that boil on Hitler's taint. But when I see him in person, I actually pity him. He knows that he has done many bad things, that he was not a good father. It plagues him. He cries about it daily, and yet still he does nothing to right his wrongs. He remains cemented in his position of ultimate righteousness and piety, the light that springs forth when God farts. That's fucking Charles. Pathetic, utterly lost, stinky Charles. Now, that was what my mother had to contend with. Those were her cards, all unsuited, and nothing is wild. Now, my mother is a very sweet person. She's also highly intelligent, but she has zero common sense, no social skills, no vocal filter, no ability to regulate emotion, and a paucity of patience perspective taking. Okay, she does best when it's just her and does not have to play well with others. We're just going to leave it at that. It's not her fault. She was never taught by anyone. She has changed some of her thinking through the years, of me yelling and screaming at her, but there's always been a price to pay for this change of thinking. Like, she gets a new set of eyes, and then she decides she needs to try them out by staring directly into the sun for a month or so, and then she's confused while she's plagued by dark spots and swirls and scathing headaches. Sometimes I think that she really can't actually handle things. Like, she's pretty delicate in that way. Like, she does not adapt to change at all. Think Rain Man and Wapner. but without the head banging and the cool card tricks. Now, my mother, she drives me insane. I know. Everyone's mother drives them insane, but I'm actually considering this DNA crap that I've been babbling about. Like, don't you think that I might actually be a little off my nut at sometimes? When it involves my mother, I actually go off my nut. Her voice turns my blood cold. I constantly pinch the top of my nose, rub my temples, shake my head in utter impotent confusion when I speak to her on the phone. One time recently, I called her to check in on her. I asked her how her week had been, and she just started to talk about myself, and my cell phone disconnected. So my mother does not have call waiting. I tried to call back several times, and I got a busy signal, so I timed it. It was 14 minutes before she realized that I was not on the other end of the phone. So when I was actually back on the phone, she didn't even pause. She just started her story right back up. She had a 14-minute monologue about how she has seasonal vertigo. I am not making that up. Seasonal vertigo. Wow. Just wow. Being her actual presence turns me into a methed out weasel. I'm twitchy. I'm paranoid. I'm willing to chew off my own leg just to be released from her trap. Like, sometimes I even turn into an old swayback mare. I just keep walking around in circles, just carrying my load, turning the mill, and doing whatever to keep her fucking happy, just trying to be a good enough daughter. And that is what ties this diatribe all together. Is good enough. Like, will I be good enough? What about my hand of cards? What if my mother, who never had the training, why in the world would I think that I would be any different? I've never even changed a diaper, for fuck's sake. I have no siblings. I was never exposed to any kind of child rearing. How can I be sure that I will not have my child suffer the sins of my mother and me? A simple answer is, I can't. And I don't like that answer. But enough about how my mother was screwed. Let's talk about my